So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, in my part, my part is mainly devoted for four affective factors. Yeah, yes. It is devoted to four affective factors.
Devoted to affective.
Yeah. Sorry. Devoted to four affective or I'm sorry? No, I am going to talk about four affective factors. That's what I'm saying. It's not two. So, namely, anxiety. Sorry. So, namely, anxiety, empathy, extraversion, and introversion, and finally, motivation. So, first of all, we are going to see that anxiety plays an important role in the acquisition of second language learning, and it is also one of the common problems in ELC. So, in your opinion, I would like to raise a question. How can you define anxiety in your opinion? Can someone provide me of the definition of anxiety? Yeah, anxiety.
When you are nervous.
Yeah, that's a part of it. Yeah, that's a part of it. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's being uncomfortable in safe environment.
Have you ever experienced that kind of situations? Can someone tell us of his experience with
For example,
anxiety?
Speaking,
Yeah.
the first time you take responsibility or you take part of public speaking, you feel a kind of anxiety and fear too, especially
That's true.
to the audience.
Yeah, that's true. So thank you with that.
What do you feel?
So,
How do you feel like now?
a little bit nervous and a little bit of stress. So that's anxiety. Actually, anxiety is a factor that is intertwined with self-esteem and inhibition and risk taken, as we have seen with Mr. Brahim. So it plays an important role, or it plays an important effective role in second language acquisition. Even the third point, go ahead. So even though we all know that what anxiety is, and we all have experienced feelings of anxiousness, anxiety is still not easy to define in a simple sentence. And to put it more simply, we can say that it is associated with feelings of uneasiness, frustration, self-doubt, apprehension, or worry. And in this context, the research on anxiety suggested that anxiety can be experienced at various levels, and those are the main levels. First of all, we have one at the global level, and the second one, it is on a deepest level. Namely, trait anxiety, which is a permanent predisposition to be anxious. So here we are talking about when people they get nervous, not in a particular, for example, event, but in a continuous level. For example, they feel all the time anxious, and they are always anxious, and maybe that kind of anxiety they interfere in their everyday life. And the second level, which is in a deepest one, which is called state anxiety, which is experienced in relation. Sorry.
So there is something missing.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, something is missing here. Anyways, we have two kinds.
State. Instead of trait, it is state.
We have trait anxiety, and the second one.
The next slide, can you go to the next slide?
State.
No, here it explains the first one, but here we have two levels actually. We have trait anxiety, and the second one, which is state anxiety, which experienced in relation to some particular event or act. So here you feel anxious when you have some particular event, not at the first one, when you feel anxious all the time. And in this context,
Permanent this predisposition.
Yeah, it is. But the
It is
second
there.
one,
Okay?
Yes.
All the time. Even if you are not anxious,
yeah, you
but you
feel
have it there.
Yes.
And this permanent predisposition varies from one to another.
Yeah.
Okay? Yes.
But
It's like, let's call it a kind of skill that you have, okay? Everyone has it, it's there. And then when you have the variables there for triggering of the feeling of anxiety, then you are having this, the next one.
state anxiety. So it is a momentary, not the first one.
It depends on the context, the situation, which triggers off the feeling.
Yes,
Like stage
we can say that. But if you have it like in a permanent level,
yes, stage.
yeah, state anxiety. So concerning trait anxiety, because of its global, as we said, and somehow ambiguous defined nature, has not proved to be useful in predicting second language achievement, because it can be here related to many factors such as the personality development and the environment and the surrounding of the learner. And however, recent research on language anxiety, as it has come to be known, focuses more, especially on the situational nature of the state anxiety. So they focus on the second level of anxiety, not the first one. And it is more important here that recent research on language anxiety focuses more, as I said, on on the situation and nature of state anxiety. And in this regard, three components of foreign language anxiety have been identified. First of all, we have communication apprehension. When you feel like worry and stressed, for example, you are worried from something unpleasant to happen to you or something like that. So here, as we said, communication apprehension arising from learners' inability to adequately express mature thoughts or ideas. When the learner, he is or she is afraid or she is stressed to express her ideas because of, for example, she is afraid that people will laugh at her and so on. And the second component, which is fear of negative social evaluation, arising from learners' need to make a positive social impression on others. The fear of how people will evaluate or will judge you. And the third component, which is test anxiety. So test anxiety or apprehension over academic evaluation, the anxiety toward the evaluation that you will have in
Okay. Now, as you
schools.
see, one thing you should never forget during this course and always is that things are interrelated. So we have talked about the fear of risk taking.
Yes.
Now here we are talking about the reason, okay, the source of it, which is anxiety and these types of
And a decade, in this regard actually, a decade of research had now given us a useful information on foreign language anxiety. So most of these studies conclude that foreign language anxiety can be distinguished from other types of anxiety, as we have mentioned before, and that it can have a negative effect on the language learning process. So here studies have shown that anxiety can contribute somehow in the failure or the success of language. So, and in this context, actually, two types of anxiety have been identified, namely debilitative anxiety, which is a harmful anxiety when you feel you have that feel of worry actually towards something, and which causes a psychological, if you want, a psychological barrier. And it hinders the performance of the students. And the second, yeah, it blocks you. And the second type, actually facilitative anxiety, which is a helpful anxiety. Here we are talking about a kind of anxiety which pushes the learner to do more and to do his best. So it is.
Unfortunately, much of what we have in the educational system,
Yes.
teachers foster the first one.
Yeah.
Okay? They don't foster the second one when they are teaching.
Maybe the second one is the pressure, for example.
Yeah, there should be pressure, but positive pressure. But the teachers do, they put you lots of Sure.
Yeah.
When they block you, that's yes.
And most of the time, we incline to view anxiety as a negative factor. But we can say that the notion of facilitative anxiety is that some concern, some apprehension over a task to be accomplished in a positive factor. So here, facilitative anxiety, it can keep one poised, alert, and just slightly unbalanced to the point that one cannot relax entirely. So here, the facilitative anxiety can be just enough tension to get something done. So several studies have been suggested that the benefit of facilitative anxiety in the learning foreign languages. For example, in Bailey's study of competitiveness and anxiety in second language learning, facilitative anxiety was one of the keys to success, closely related to competitiveness. So here they are thinking of anxiety as a positive factor, not a negative one. And she said in her self-analysis that while competitiveness sometimes hindered her progress, at other times it motivated her to study harder. So it's a kind of motivator to her. And a further byproduct of ongoing research on language anxiety that has been debated over whether anxiety is the cause of poor performance in second language or a product of less than satisfactory performance. That's what the research will show. So a research finding shows that the linguistic defects coding hypothesis deficit coding. Yeah. The linguistic deficit coding hypothesis proposed and defended by Sparks and Ganshaw and their colleagues in the is controversial in singling out native language deficits and potential causes of anxiety. And here when we talk about the deficits, the language deficits, we have mainly two kinds of deficits: oral expressions and listening comprehension, which contribute as a crucial kinds of controlling our abilities in communication. So in this context, some researchers that are specialized on the object to the LCDH, they point out that a number of other significant sources of anxiety may be present in a language learning situations, such as a quest for perfection, fear of negative evaluation, and identity conflicts, among others. So here, the emphasis on those kinds of learning situations, as I said, such as quest for perfection, those students who are seeking for perfectionism. As you say, for example, there are some students who attend to, or they are willing to reach a level which is a kind of impossible. So that inhibit them to perform well.
Is it LCH or LCH?
I'm sorry?
Concerning the abbreviation of that.
Yeah.
The
LDCH. Yeah, LDCH. So here we can say that language deficit coding hypothesis.
What does it mean?
Yeah, as I said, we are talking about two kinds: oral expressions and the listening comprehension, which contribute as a kind of controlling our communication and facilitating our communication.
So in your book you have the explanation. If you go to you have the book, the glossary. The glossary, you go to the glossary section. Page 385, you have a definition of linguistic coding hypothesis. So this symbol is not that complicated. They claim that anxiety in a foreign language, okay, could be the result of first
Language.
student learning second
Okay.
or foreign language already has
Certain.
deficits
Yeah.
in speaking, in phonological, syntactic, or lexical, semantic. And these, when learning a foreign language, the same learner transfers those deficits. It's a kind of hypothesis. It's not a hypothesis. It's debatable. Okay? But this is the meaning of what we discussed. Okay?
And from here we can conclude that language anxiety is a consequence of the difficulties that students have in their learning, language learning. So when it comes to the implication,
This one is really applicable to children, you know, when they learn a native language, and then they learn in a second or foreign language.
It's a transfer.
But for the adults, not an issue. Okay? For adults, it's not an issue because children, they are still learning their native language, they are still becoming. Okay? At this primary school now, if you go to kindergarten, you can see that the children are learning one language, second language, French, English. Yeah, so things can happen, something like this can happen in that stage. But for adults, it's not an issue.
I know a person who can pronounce
Are you talking about an adult or an adult? Adult. Yeah. What do you think is the reason? He can pronounce English. You cannot, that has not to do with the articulatory system. It has to do with the articulatory system. Biological hindrance. Yeah, phonology, but this one has to do with the biology, with the physics, with the physiology, the articulatory system. Because if the person can't pronounce it in genetic language, understand it. You know, people, you have people like Shit pronounces because of the biology, the teeth, they are not appropriately situated to pronounce the. So this has to do with the biology. Okay? They are not used. That's another. For example, here, like they are learning like in your case, you're still learning Moroccan Arabic, and we know this in Moroccan Arabic there are some sounds that don't exist in French or in English. So for them, they are fixed like frozen kind of article system. They can't pronounce it exactly the same way we do.
The from the book Relation. When you want to call the name of
So, but this has to do with, again, the article.
Biological. Yeah.
It's not a deficit that the people have, they didn't learn proper biology, something, a rule or biology. No, it has to do with biology. That's a different case.
I have my small brother is 5 years old and he can't speak
Yes. It has to do with biology. Okay, good.
Okay, when it comes to the implications for teaching, we can say that language teachers should assess what kind of anxiety their language students are facing. Meaning that the teacher, it is worth that the teacher knows what kind of anxiety his or her students they have. For example, if they have the debilitative anxiety, the teacher should encourage them to use the facilitative one. And concerning the second point, it could
also you have mentioned the fact that there are 2 types of for I don't want you to ask if you go down up again. So you have state and vice representative, then you have talked about
debilitative and
communication, apprehension, and then you have also talked about fear of negative social evaluation and then test anxiety. That's other types of anxiety. So still teachers should try to play a role in naming
and take those into consideration.
Help the students get rid of that and to improve the facilitative kind of
anxiety. So it will be that a little nervous tension in the process is a good thing, as we have mentioned already, and too much or too little anxiety might hinder the process of successful second language learning. So here we can say it is clearly that anxiety plays an important role in the learning of second language. So we have, go ahead. Sorry, I think this one, we can go back to the book and then try it. Or we can go, okay. Okay. No, go back. Okay, some approaches to language teaching fail to accomplish the goal of communicatively in the learner by overlooking the social nature of language. Although people tend to recognize the importance of the social aspect of language, they also tend to oversimplify that aspect by two, two points, not recognizing the complexity of the relation between language and society. They do not recognize how the society and language, they are linked and related.
And we know that this is a kind of issue for textbooks.
Yeah, that's
They usually, especially in foreign textbooks,
they don't take
usually
it.
come with a kind of concept which is
Totally different from ours.
different from the native culture of the students.
Yeah, that's true.
And so this is, they don't take into account
Into consideration, yeah. As well as they do not consider the social-oriented problems in language learning as a simple matter of acculturation, which is a process in which members of one culture group adopt the beliefs and behaviors of another group. And that's what our professor has already mentioned. They don't take this into account. So acculturation is no simple process. The social transactions that the second language learner is called upon to make constitute complex endeavors, and that's what we are going to tackle in the next slide. So when it comes to transaction, it is the process of reaching out beyond the self to others, and language is a major tool used to accomplish that process. So here we talk about transaction. We are talking about the process of putting ourselves in going beyond ourselves to reach the other. So, and here we are talking about the vicarious learning. Can we say that? The vicarious learning or experiencing of feelings and thoughts of others. So in this context, a variety of transaction variables may apply to second language learning, such as imitations, modeling, identification, empathy, extraversion, aggression, styles of communication, and so on. And we have mainly picked up two variables, namely empathy and extraversion. Go ahead. So when it comes to empathy, it is the process of putting yourself into someone else's shoes, of reaching beyond the self to understand what another person is feeling. So here we are talking about the ability to understand the feelings and thoughts of others. And in the same context, psychologists generally claim that you cannot fully sympathize, know someone else until you adequately know yourself. So here you cannot put yourself in the shoes of others unless you have experienced the same thing as that person.
Until you adequately know yourself.
You know yourself and
you know yourself as a teacher.
yes.
You know because there are different levels in this regard between people. There are people who know themselves very well and they cope with that. It's very useful for the stability of the psychology of the ego. So if you have that, then you can go and
put yourself
empathetic with others.
Okay. And in the same context, we can say that communication.
Because what you are going to say, Ikram, is the fact that if the others are not empathetic with you, you cannot be empathetic with others. That's not the point. Here it means that you have to reach that maturity, stability, understanding of your ego and psychology.
Without experiencing what the other person is.
And then when you have this understanding of your self is well established, you can go beyond yourself.
And reach
if you don't have this stability, you have problems yourself.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
how going to be empathetic with others who have problems
without knowing?
if you yourself have problems?
Yeah, that's true.
Do you understand what we mean?
Yes.
People are different. That's why you have crazy people. That's why you have people sick. Okay. You have different things. Until you have a repartition there, different levels.
Yeah.
But the good people who are stable, psychologically stable, doing well, so those people, because they have no problems, they can be beyond themselves to the understanding of the others and be empathic with them.
That's true. So, as I said, in this regard, we can say that communication requires a sophisticated degree of empathy, and that's what our professor has already mentioned. So, in another, to communicate effectively, you need to be able to understand the other person's affective and cognitive state. So that's true. And here we can say that communication breaks down with false presupposition of assumptions are made about the other person's state. And in this regard, we are going to talk about two types of communication, namely the oral communication and the written communication. When it comes to oral communication, we can say that it is a case in which, cognitively at least, it is easy to achieve empathetic communication because there is immediate feedback from the hearer. So here, when you are talking, the hearer can give you an immediate feedback. And a misunderstood word, phrase, or idea can be questioned by the hearer and then rephrased by the speaker until a clear message is interpreted. Clear?
Yeah.
And when it comes to written communication, we can say that it requires a special kind of empathy, because a cognitive empathy in which the writer, without the benefit of immediate feedback from the reader. So if you are reading a text, you cannot give your feedback or something because it is already there, so you cannot change it. That's why the reader must communicate ideas by means of a very clear empathetic intuition and the writer. The writer in an empathetic intuition and judgment of the reader's state of mind and structure of knowledge.
So here what we're talking about is communication. Okay, forget about classroom.
Yes.
Communication as it happens outside everyday life. And of course, in communication, you have two here. You have oral communication.
And
oral communication, you need to be empathic, of course. And how are you going to be empathetic? Via the feedback that you get from the
immediately. Yeah.
So that's a good situation, better situation. But for the written communication, it gets a bit complex because you don't have feedback. So how are you going to establish this empathy?
The writer should take.
It becomes difficult. So here lies the role of
the writer.
Relying on your intuition as a writer, on your
Judgment
of the reader's state of mind, and structure of knowledge. And this has to do with maturity, experience.
Because it's a little bit difficult from the first one.
We can't do it personally.
Yeah.
We can't do this from the very beginning and to have this, okay? But you can establish that if you produce, and then you start building a relationship between the audience, reading audience, and then you can understand what happens.
Is going on.
Establish this intuition, judgment of the reader's state of mind,
and structure of knowledge. Yeah. So in
for example, in research, you are going to have this in the research.
Yeah.
Because you are writing for a readership. And your readership is quite sophisticated because you are going to establish like for an article or a thesis, it's for other researchers. And when we are talking about other researchers, we're talking about knowledgeable people, and educated people, intellectual people, researchers. Now, for you to be able to be empathic with this kind of readership, and be successful in convincing them, what you can do is you go through the literature. That's why in research, students and people, researchers, they go to the literature. And by doing this, as much as you read, of course, you establish this intuition. You establish this knowledge of the kind of argumentation going on. You establish knowledge of the terminology going on. You establish this knowledge of the theories going on. Okay? So that when you have this connection with all of this, you have established a kind of empathy with your readership. Okay?
Yes.
So, you understand what I
Yeah.
mean by it? So this is outside of classroom, outside of the teaching and learning. Now,
Yeah. So
yes,
Does this include, for example, how the teacher, for example, should react to students' attacks, for example, in writing? Does it mean, for example, the teacher should be empathic towards such writers to try to understand the students' states of mind at the time they are writing?
yes.
you should always take
That's
audience into consideration.
Okay, here, yes, you establish this empathy in this way. Yes. So you have to be empathic with your
Student.
okay, with your student who is writing. Okay, and here you have to be empathic. I want to see the implications of this for classroom. But this one, empathic. Let's say you understand your students, don't humiliate, don't all types of negative things to do for the student. You have to be encouraging, you have to be okay, tolerant, and so on and so forth. Okay? But this is not really the point in there. Okay? This is not really the point. There's no connection between what I say and what's there. Okay? It's just to answer you. Yes.
Next question. So, in a second language learning situation, the problem of empathy becomes acute, a sensitive one. So, not only must learner speakers correctly identify cognitive and affective sets in the hearer, but they must do so in a language in which they are insecure. So here we are talking about the security of the learner, the environment in which he or she feels insecure. Then learner hearers attempting to comprehend a second language often discover that their own states of thought are misinterpreted by a native speaker, and the result is that linguistic, cognitive, and affective information easily passes in one ear and out of the other. So here we are talking about, for example, misunderstandings and so on. And now we are going to talk about the seventh factor or variable, namely the eighth variable, namely extraversion and introversion. So when it comes to introversion and its counterpart, introversion, are also potentially important factors in the acquisition of a second language. And the terms are often misunderstood because of a tendency to stereotype extraversion, the definition of extraversion. And the stereotype here, we are born to think of an extroverted person actually as a gregarious, like...
just to finish talking about empathy.
Yeah.
Now, what is the purpose of what you are doing in this course, for example? What do you think is the purpose? And so that you can be empathic with your students. Okay?
Yes.
So that's why. But because in the book it focuses, just the fact that you haven't mentioned the research.
The study?
Yeah. For empathy, the same thing we have seen with anxiety, the same thing we have seen with other things. There was research that tries to investigate how empathy can help or hinder the learning of foreign or second language. Okay? And it has been established that it has a role to play. It's not total, but it has a role. In the book, you have some literature in there. But to establish a connection between empathy and implications for teaching, so I'll give you the answer.
Yeah.
All what you are doing in here is to help you as a forthcoming teacher to establish this intuition, this state of knowledge, this kind of to help you be empathic with your students.
Because when you know what's going on in the learner's mind,
Yeah.
So we are answering the question that was posed by Zachary at the very beginning, you remember?
Yeah.
So this is the fact. Yes, Ikram?
So when it comes to the definition of extraverted and introverted, we can say that introverted person, which is a stereotype actually. So extraverted person, they define it as a gregarious, which is a life of the party person, the person that likes to party and they likes to socialize and so on. Yeah, while introverted person or introverts, conversely, are thought of a quiet and reserved with tendency toward reclusiveness. So it's totally the opposite. And in Western society, they value actually the stereotypical extroverted. They value that definition of extraverted person. And now here, is this more evident that in the classroom where teachers admire the talkative, outgoing student who participate freely in class discussion, more the introverted student. And on the other hand, introverted are sometimes thought of as not being as bright as extroverted, even though they might be the reverse, they might be really clever. And such a view of extraversion is misleading, and that's why we are going to see the difference between the two. So when it comes to extraversion, we can say it is the extent to which a person has a deep-rooted need to receive ego enhancement, self-esteem, and the sense of wholeness from other people, as opposite to receiving that affirmation within oneself. So they like to receive a kind of enhancement from others. And here, extroverted actually need other people in order to feel good. And they are not necessarily loud-mouthed and talkative. And they may be relatively shy, but still need the affirmation of others. On the other hand, we find that introverted students or introversion, which is the state of the tendency toward being wholly or predominantly concerned with and interest in one's own mental life. And in contrary to our stereotypes, introverts can have an inner strength of characters that extroverted do not have. Our professor have mentioned that in the last session. So they tend to be quiet, low-key, deliberate, and relatively non-engaged in social situations. They take pleasure in solitary activities such as reading, writing, drawing, watching movies, listening to music, and so on. And maybe this answers Mr. Akhra's question. Yes. So it is unfortunate that these stereotypes have influenced teachers' perception of students. So in this context, Ozable and other educators have warned against prejudging students on the basis of perceiving extraversion. And in language classes where oral participation is highly valued, it is easy to view active participants, or talkativeness between two brackets, with favor and to assume that their visibility in the class is due to extraversion factors. And culturally, for example, American society differ considerably from a number of other societies where it is improper to speak out in the classroom. Teachers need to consider cultural norms in their assessment of a student presumed passivity in the classroom. For example, in the American society where teachers, they value those extroverted students. For example, in other societies such as Japan, teachers value the students, for example, because there is the notion of respectiveness and so on. So they are more quiet and they don't use to talk a lot in the classroom. So here we raise a question. Does extraversion or introversion help or hinder the process of second language question? Actually, a study, acquisition. So the Toronto study in found no significant effect for extraversion in characterizing the good language learning. So there is no significant effect of introversion. And
This is the answer for
Mr. Akhbar's question.
Yeah.
There is no relationships. So Bash,
Bash.
Bash in Bush or Bash, 1982, in a comprehensive study on extraversion, explored the relation of extraversion and introversion and extraversion to English proficiency in adult Japanese learning of English in Japan, as I have already mentioned.
Yeah.
So she hypothesized that extroverted students would be more proficient than extroverted or introverts. So her hypothesis was not supported by her findings. She found that introverts were significantly better than extroverted in their pronunciation. And this latter result clouded our stereotype of the extroverted language learner as a frequent and willing participant in class activities. And she also found that introverts may have the patience and focus to attend to clear articulation in a foreign language. So they do better than the extroverted students. And here, how effective are techniques that incorporate, for example, drama, patronymy, humor, role plays, and overt personality exposure? Here, in this context, a teacher needs to be aware of trying to create in a student more so-called extraversion that... go ahead. No, go ahead.
That's it.
No.
Oh.
Sorry. So each teacher needs to be aware of trying to create in a second more so-called extraversion that is really necessary. So the teachers need to be sensitive to cultural norms, to a student's willingness to speak out in class, and to optimal points between extraversion and introversion that may vary from one student to another. Sorry?
Motivation.
Yeah, I know. So come up to the ninth variable, which is motivation. Motivation is probably the most frequent used catch-all terms for explaining the success or failure of virtually any complex task. It is actually motivation is easy to assume that success in any task is due simply to the fact that someone is motivated. So here we are talking about the importance of motivation in terms of the successful or the failure of any person. It is easy to say that in second language learning, to claim that a learner will be successful with the proper motivation. That's why motivation, it's not easy, it is not an easy concept to define. Right. So here we raise a question. What does it mean to say that someone is motivated, and how do you create, foster and maintain motivation? So here in this regard, the various definitions of motivation have been proposed over the course of decades of research. Following the historical schools of thought, we know three different perspectives emerge, namely the behavioristic view, the cognitive view, and finally the constructivist view. So concerning the first perspective, which is a behavioristic one, they claim that motivation is seen in very matter-of-fact terms. It is quite simply the anticipation of reward. When students seek, for example, we have negative reinforcement and the positive reinforcement, but it has to do more with the positive one. driven to acquire positive reinforcement and driven by previous experiences of reward for behavior, we act accordingly to achieve further reinforcement. If there is a positive reinforcement, students tend to do their effort to reach that
So
reward.
this is how motivation is triggered off in this framework.
Yeah.
To anticipate reward,
Fear of-
anticipate positive reinforcement, and it
punishment.
goes on all the time like that.
And actually, how it is on that way that people work hard and they do their best if you reward them, unlike if you don't. And concerning,
It's applicable even if the theory now is
Yes.
still applicable all the time.
yeah,
To anticipate reward.
Yeah. And concerning the cognitive perspective, these
The
say
problem with the behaviorist approach is, you shouldn't forget this, is the fact that they focus on one aspect of learning, which is this one, reinforcement. And they didn't deal with the cognitive.
yeah, just the desire of receiving that reinforcement. And concerning the cognitive perspective, these say motivation places much more emphasis on the individual's decisions, the choices people make as to what experiences or goals they will approach or avoid, and the degree of effort they will exert in that respect. So here we are when it comes to motivation, it is driven by the basic needs. Namely, for example, we have the exploration, manipulation, activity, stimulation, knowledge, and ego enhancement. And when it comes to the constructivist view, they places even further emphasis on social context as well as individual personal choices. So each person is motivated differently from others and will therefore act on his or her environment in a way that are unique. But these unique acts are always carried out within a cultural and social milieu and cannot be completely separated from that context. So here the context is, or the surrounding affects the performance of the learner in a way or in another. And
Orientations.
no, go back. Go back. There is like a slide missing here.
Yeah.
Go back.
Oh, instrumental. You're passive.
You can go on. Now, forget about any other thing. We can go on now talking about
Instrumental.
instrumental.
That's it.
Yeah. How many slides are missing?
No, yeah, okay.
So, what is this behaviorist and then?
And then we have the, and then we have a study of meditation.
Okay.
That's it. That's it.
Yes. I said it's okay.
So we
That's
just
okay,
talking,
that's it.
yeah, that's
That's it. Oh, okay, then.
So when it comes to instrumental and integrative orientations, a study of motivation in second language acquisition often refer to this distinction between integrative and instrumental orientations of the learner. So concerning integrative orientation, it refers actually to learners who wish to integrate themselves into the culture of the second language group and become involved in the social interchange in that group. So here we are talking about the learners who are willing to integrate themselves on the cultures of others and to know more about it. And when it comes to the instrumental orientation, which refers to acquiring a language as a mean for attaining instrumental goals. For example, furthering a career, reading technical material, transition. Here we are talking about students or learners who are attending for their professional growth and their career and so
And
on.
that's what motivation.
Yeah, they are part of motivation.
Yes.
The first one is more effective.
Same.
Yes, but we will see that they are mixed actually. You cannot use one without the other. So in this context, Gardner and Lambert, 1972, and
I suggest if you go on with the implications for teaching, we have.
Okay, I still have this one.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah. That's it.
intrinsic
Motivation.
No, you're not going to talk about it?
No.
It's, one
So I'm going to talk.
Okay, good. Now for the research, you can go and read one at its own, and we're going to stop in here, okay? For my colleague.
So I have just 15 slides. So it's not so much, it's
No, I have to.
15.
Okay?
15. Okay.
And thank you.